It's almost like I go into a time machine and go back in time to my parents' time, to our grandparents' time. And it's a comfortable feeling for me. And I wish and I hope that the younger generation will be able to also experience that too, because that's a part of history. The first day I brought home this Vanagon, I was actually pretty stoked about it because the overall story that's behind it, being the fact that it was at Young's old Volks home for 7 years, just kind of sitting and waiting to get, not claimed, but at the same time, like picked up by the potential buyer who had bought it sight unseen, you know, and the fact that it just seemed like a van that had such good bones that just needed to be taken to the next level, and that it just needed to be driven. And I knew that the engine had been rebuilt. I knew that Gary Young had done a bunch of stuff to it to make it roadworthy, and it always has been roadworthy. It just needed those services done to take it to the next level of its life.
So what services were those?
So it was a top end rebuild. So the heads were replaced, the radiator was replaced, the coolant lines were replaced, belts, you know, just stuff like top end stuff. You know, I mean, there wasn't anything outside of just heads, distributor, tune-up, oil change, timing, all that kind of stuff. Radiator, because the older one, you know, with these older Vanagons, you know, the story behind them is just that the cooling issues that they had with the factory cooling lines, they weren't as reliable as the newer vehicles. So when you put the stainless steel in it, it makes it a lot more efficient. You know, the old plastic that they used just would degrade, and then therefore you'd have heating issues. So those were done. So I already knew that the big stuff had been taken care of. So I was just like, okay, this is a great base to build on.
And how many miles did it have when you got it?
Oh man, I would have to say it had, I think it was like approximately 243,000 miles on it.
So it was probably due for a top end rebuild.
Yes, the fact that it went that long without a rebuild though is pretty amazing. I mean, a lot of people, what they didn't know is that you have to have a specific kind of coolant that goes through the system in order for it to work properly. You know, a lot of people don't put European blue coolant in these things, and they actually called and required it. They put green coolant in it. Really? Yes, and so, I mean, coolant is a very...
I didn't know about that.
Yeah, coolant is a very degrading material depending on the design of the vehicle that it was engineered to be, right?
It could be chemically caustic to
yes,
all sorts of metals. To
kind of sum up why I wanted it and why, when I took it home, and why I was so excited about it, was because one, Gary Young had his hands on it, and he... If the people who are listening to this doesn't know who he was, well, he was definitely a local celebrity here in terms of mechanics. You know, being the fact that he was one of the only classic Volkswagen mechanics here for 50 years. I mean, obviously back then it wasn't classic; it was just an everyday vehicle. But he was an icon, you know, here in Central Oregon, and anybody who passed through here, through California, Washington, you know, even the East Coast, doesn't matter where they were coming from, and they had a Volkswagen, air-cooled or water-cooled, they were taking it there if they broke down. My shop deals with the same thing now. You know, we have people going to Burning Man, or it doesn't matter if they're in the summertime, if they're going on a camping trip and they get stranded. You know, we're the only classic Volkswagen repair shop, aside from one other who's really good, that can handle these things. You know, we're honored, we're grateful, and I'm happy that I have at least, well, I say I have, I just sold this to a gentleman in Corvallis who's absolutely ecstatic to have it.
So what was the story? How did it end up at Young's?
5 years ago, I was over at their shop when I had my classic Volkswagen dealership, and I would go over there all the time to help them out. They'd help me out with some of the stuff that I had in my inventory and stuff like that, and I saw it sitting there for quite some time. And I asked Gary, I said, what's the word on this? And he goes, well, it's been sitting here for X amount of time. And I thought, wow, 5 years, that's a long time, you know? And at that time it was 5 years. And he's like, yeah, you know, and the story goes is that the original owner of the bus sold it to a guy in Seattle, and he wanted a pre-purchase inspection. And once that was done, he green-lighted the work that needed to be done with it, rebuilding of the engine and some other stuff, before he brought it back up to Seattle. The problem with that is that he never came and retrieved it once the work was done. Gary tried to get a hold of him. For whatever reason, he just could not get a hold of him. The guy wouldn't respond, and he thought, okay, well, something's going on. So it just kind of went to the wayside. So every once in a while, Gary would give the guy a call, leave a message on his phone, and again, no response. And so when I asked Gary about, okay, well, how do you want to deal with this? Because I have the ability to put a lien on it if you want, and then we can get title for it. Essentially, it's considered an abandoned vehicle after a certain amount of time. I can help you with that. Well, he's such a great guy. He was just like, no, we just need to wait for this guy. And I was like, okay. And 5 years goes by. I buy the business. Gary essentially said, okay, now I'm ready to go through this. I said, okay, I'll do it. I put a lien on it, went through the motions. About 2 months later, I get a phone call from the owner of the van. He got served with the letter, which I was kind of surprised because I tried to call him actually on his phone, no dice. Several times, no dice. So when he did call me, I was actually already kind of driving this thing, and when I was driving the van, kind of a backstory, I was at Sinclair gas station, and this guy walks up to the Vanagon. Didn't look anything like this, was bone stock. Walks up to the van, he's looking through the window. He's like, and I'm pumping the gas, and I said, hey, can I help you with something? And he goes, I think this was my van. And I'm like, really? He goes, yeah, this was my van. I sold it to a guy in Seattle, and are you that guy? And I was like, no. And then I shared him the story, what had happened. Told him that, I was waiting to hear from the original owner and that I had bought Young's old Volks home. The original owner of this van actually had bought another van again, which was a Synchro. He wanted a Synchro for the wintertime. And so we had a candid conversation about, his memories in this van and all that with his family and stuff like that. So that was awesome. I was just like, this is really cool because it's a 1985 Vanagon. It could have gone through 3 or 4 hands by now, even more than that if you even think about that. But I was literally talking to the original owner of this van, which was really special. So back to the gentleman that had bought this vehicle sight unseen. He calls me and he goes, hey, I'm so-and-so who had bought the Vanagon. He goes, I got this letter in the mail, and I said, oh man, I'm so thankful that you called me. I said, I've been trying to get a hold of you for the last several months, and I know that Gary had been trying to get a hold of you for the last 7 years. I said, I'm just glad that you're alive, and that's what's most important. I said, how would you like to deal with the van? I bought the business. The van kind of came with the business, but it's yours. And he goes, well, I'm sorry, my wife came down with a certain illness, and that was like the last thing that I could even think about. And I have experience with some family members who have gone through that same illness, so I completely understood and have compassion with that. And so as soon as I realized that, I was like, hey man, I'd be willing to buy this thing for you if it helps. And he was like, kind of shocked. He's like, you would? And I was like, absolutely. So we came up with a price, and I said, the only thing that I would ask of you is to please pay Gary for the work that he did to it so that we could just close this thing and make it all clean and make it just be done with it. So I wrote him a check for what we agreed to. He wrote Gary a check for the work he did, and it was done. He overnighted the title, and then boom, I'm the owner of the van. I've really enjoyed it. I mean, during the winter time, when it was like 3 feet of snow here, I wasn't exactly driving it every day, but whenever there was a good day, I was driving it. It's been basically my daily driver, and I've pampered it. And I've done everything you see from the orange from the orange stripe to the Go Westie lift to the tires, ladder, everything you see on top. Van Cafe bumpers. I'm an avid mountain biker, so I got my mountain biking rack here. Yakima outdoor shower, my Fiamma 45, and if anybody has never had a Fiamma 45 awning, I strongly recommend it. Nothing against CVT, nothing against the other manufacturers who make these awnings, but this one really, in my opinion, from my experience, is the way to go. Yeah, so the safe is actually, in my opinion, is a must-have for anybody who has a Vanagon, because if you're camping, if you're hiking, if you're floating the river, whatever you're doing, that is a must. You can put your wallet, keys, whatever you want to do. I mean, you know, you can store it in there, lock it up, and it's awesome. I'm glad that I had that. Glad that I got that. The interior is pretty much stock. I have not done anything with the interior. It was so bone stock in such good condition, the fact that it was a one owner and the previous owner took such good care of the interior, that there was really no flaws in it. And I mean, I've been in this thing in rainstorm, I've been in this thing in snowstorms, I've been in this thing in all sorts of things, and the original canvas even is in really good shape. The fridge works really well, the stove works good.
What has been your favorite trip in this?
Probably the Redwoods. I've done a couple trips in this in the Redwoods. The drive down, and you know, you go through so many different climate changes to get there. And then when you know, the color of the van is brown, so it kind of fits in with the atmosphere, you know. And a lot of really good friends I went down with. We had like over 30, you know. Okay, so backstory a little bit. We do this thing every year called Ausflug. It's with our Central Oregon Air-Cooled Association that we do, and a bunch of other air-cooled, water-cooled clubs come together, and we all just like journey down into the Redwoods, and whether it's been from Seattle all the way down to from Bend, from Southern Oregon to Northern California, we all meet up. So there's like usually 30 of us. So it's really a neat environment because we take over an entire like Jebediah State Park, you know, and it's an opportunity for everybody to kind of just talk about what they've done to their vehicles. It's like any other car shows, really, but it's actually a live, like a real life live car show where everyone's actually living it instead of just showcasing it. And so that's, you know, I've taken this thing to Descend on Bend, you know, Moxie. I've taken it to, you know, Woodburn and all those things, those fun things, you know. But the fun thing is that, you know, there's always like a community of people that come in here, and we all hang out, and we're all in this tiny space. Even though it's tiny, it still feels like a mini house. Boy. So it's, you know, there is a sense of camaraderie around this whole thing, and I'm sure a lot of you guys can relate to it. I'm sure you have your own clubs and stuff like that, and this kind of camping, for whatever reason, has not died off. There is not a system outside of this design, this class of van or bus that can compete with this setup. Now, there's people out there who design their own interiors, and it's a fantastic, you know, I mean, engineering minds, all those guys. It's great. You know, and you have your, you know, your Sprinter van people, you know, you have your schoolie bus people, and I think it's great. There's just this creativity that it's like an art, you know. You come with these stock vehicles, and they are just bone stock, and then your brain is this van. So whatever your van looks like is who you are as a person, and that's what's displayed, you know. Now, obviously, you can get ideas, and you can get, you know, motivated by other people's, you know, stuff that they do. So when you look at other vans, you're like, oh, well, that makes sense. You know, that makes sense. But I think it's a matter of how what fits your purpose, you know. And so this one fit my purpose, and this is what I did. It may not be exactly the way other people would do it. I understand that. There's what the funny thing is, Brendan.
This is my rifle. There are many rifles. This one is
exactly.
Mine.
So there was so many more things I wanted to do this van before I decided to sell it. There was so many more things, and like these are what I call it's a Swiss Army knife. You can do so much. I mean, you can get in, you can drive it on a daily basis, you can park it anywhere. You don't never have to use hotels if you don't want to. You know, they are a self-sufficient vessel. So when I was talking about this vehicle having good bones, I already knew it had good bones, because a lot of the times I end up having to restore a lot of this stuff when I buy it. Mm-hmm. And I didn't have to do that with this. Basically, it was just accessory stuff. Aside from the oil changes and some belt changes, and I had to replace a fuel pump in this thing, you know, everything else is just extra, you know. Done really well. Now, I just sold this van. This van's going to be leaving in the next week or so to a gentleman in Corvallis, Oregon. He's going to carry the torch on this thing. And the only reason why I sold this van, this awesome van, which was a really hard decision to make, was because I had an incredible vehicle that came into my life, and I had to have it. Since I've had this van, well, other vans too. But since I've had this van in the last 2+ years, I have not had a single hotel room. I go visit friends, families out of state, anywhere. They're like, oh, do you want to stay in a hotel? Do you want to stay in our house? I'm like, no, I'm going to stay in my van. So we parked at their house with my van. And the beautiful thing is about it is that it's my van. I don't have to have them wash their sheets or whatever they, like when you stay at their house, accommodations and all that kind of stuff. If I want to wake up early in the morning and go on a hike, I do that. If I want to cook something or have coffee in my own van, I do that before I even go into the house. It's a self-contained travel vehicle, and they're shaped in all different sizes. And this is just one of the sizes. So with that being said, the one that I just bought, because I sold this, is just slightly smaller, older, but in my opinion, somewhat cooler. The 1969 Volkswagen Campmobile is what they called it. This came to me from my shop, from a customer who wanted me to sell it for him. I had no idea what it looked like, what condition it was in. I got a phone call from a gentleman and said, hey, I heard that you buy and sell classic Volkswagens. I just moved back up from California, and I had just previously sold my Beetle, and we're downsizing and we needed to sell this bus. And from the phone call, I was like, yeah, come to my house, or come to my shop, love to see it. Now in my mind's eye, I was thinking like, okay, 69 Volkswagen, early bay, Campmobile, okay, cool. But a lot of these don't come in the condition that this one came in. When he rolled up to my shop, I didn't even see it. I just heard it purring like a kitten. I was like, well, that sounds like a good Volkswagen. Of course, I hear these things come up to my shop all day long. I come outside and I saw it and I was like, oh, that's pretty nice. So allegedly, my client had said that he bought it from the original owner and that it had less than 100,000 miles on it. He bought it in 2012 with about 98,000 miles on it. Well, from this reading, it looks like 102,000 miles on it. If that's the case, I've actually looked at the numbers on the engine and checked, and they do match for the year. But you can go to Volkswagen and get a birth certificate, which I plan on doing, and that might be able to shed some more light onto it. And this thing literally will fire up at first thing in the morning, just bam. I don't even have to put any gas into it when I do it. I've already taken one trip over to the valley in this, I put about 600 miles on it over the pass, and it handled it like a champ. In terms of
mine doesn't idle this much. I've got a big fat cam in mine, but
yeah,
I'm appreciating the.
I need to adjust the idle on it a little bit, the choke a little bit, but it's got, all the emissions on it. So the emissions, it still has California emissions on there, which is nice. It's all stock, bone stock. A lot of these you would see with like alterations and stuff like that, but this is exactly how it was when it came out of the factory. Yeah, exactly. Except for the distributor. Not vacuum advance. I plan on actually doing a vacuum advance on this thing, bringing it back to that. So you're right.
I'm not a stickler for originality, however.
I'm a huge fan of vacuum advance, to be honest with you. Allegedly, now I put a lot of these canvases on here. He said that this is the original canvas. If that's the case, and if this has about 100,000 miles on it, that might be accurate.
Especially with the mop.
Yeah, you got the mop up there, that's retro. You see the factory handwriting up there, over on the end of the, you see up here on the pop top up there?
Yeah, I'm gonna zoom in on it right.
That's pretty cool.
That is cool.
Now I actually looked around this to see if it was all like the original glass. Unfortunately, the front windshield is not original. Now, I've had a lot of Volkswagens that have had the original front windshield, like my 57 here has the original front windshield, which is really cool. I'm not so worried about that. And, I don't think this was considered a deluxe because it has Cal on here. I'm not sure if Westies had that.
Westies, as far as I know, Westies were not.
But I do know that my tin top was a deluxe, my 68.
Yes, so that would have the chrome. That should have the chrome molding.
But it doesn't, which I'm going to replace.
But this one should not.
Correct.
The only chrome on the campers is just the basic component chrome.
Okay. Now everything else is. This is gone. I know it has had a second paint job. I do know that. I've investigated that, and it shows. But in terms of like body work, Bondo, I've taken a magnet through this whole thing. Not a single bit of body work has been done to it, which is very impressive. And all of the tags on everything is still legible, easy to read. I know that they probably replaced these seals up here before because these look pretty. And again, this thing was garage kept. I can tell it was garage kept. I know this because I've driven and serviced hundreds, if not over 1,000 of these classic Volkswagens, and you just never know depending on the environment of which the vehicle is at. But my guess is this was actually replaced. Still has the trays on the side here, which is actually, you usually find a lot of those missing. I have removed the kitchenette in here. It is actually in pristine condition. I have it in a very dry storage. I just put it out because in today's modern camping, it just doesn't make sense to have this right here, and it comes all the way out to here, so you only have that little bit of space to get in and out. I have 2 dogs. That's a pain in the butt. So I just removed it, but I kept it for keepsakes in case down the road I want to sell it. It makes it worth more by having that still there. A lot of times they get gutted out and you never see them again. It's just like the middle seat on the buses. People would rip them out because they were going to camp in them, and they would end up in a garage, or they end up in Goodwill, or they end up getting in the dump because nobody ever really thought that was important. And if you have a split window bus, now you're hoping and wishing that you could bring it back to stock. And yes, there are companies out there that do make them, but it's really hard to track down, and they're very expensive. Now, if you want to look at the interior, it's pretty impressive because it's all original, everything original. Everything electronically works great. I put this mat in, of course. There is actually a wood floor, which the guy before me did. I believe that there was not a wood floor in here before. I believe it was carpet. Because if you look under here, Brendan, look at this.
Yeah, that looks right.
I think this was original.
Yeah, that looks right.
That's awesome. I wish that whole thing was that now, but beggars can't be choosers. Original wood, everything. Cot is even in there, even though it's torn. So I don't know what I'm going to do with that, but I'm pretty sure the front seats have actually been redone at one point in time, but they are the original door panels and everything. The dash is in really good shape. There's your typical crack spots, but other than that, it's very clean. And even where your foot goes on the clutch is kind of worn down, but underneath there's zero rust. There's zero rust on this bus. Underneath, even this is original, all of this, which is in really good shape. So it's really a time capsule. And so I've owned a lot of bays. I haven't owned very many early bays, but when I saw this, I fell in love with it right away. And I thought to myself, you know what, Dave? You had a lot of fun with the Vanagon, but there's really just something really cool about traveling and camping in a bay window bus, not alone a early bay window bus, and so it's just, again, like an artist, I want to be able to, I have all these ideas. I want to keep everything stock, but I also have ideas of what I'm going to do in terms of like camping with my dogs in a more of an annex for them to be outside and not inside, and then with an awning and stuff like that, and just having it be like just self-containing on the inside. Another thing to note, and I'm sure a lot of people know this who are Volkswagen enthusiasts, that early bay buses, the way they have it configured with the pop top going up, it would go up this way and not this way. With it going this way, they made room for a cot, but they didn't really make room for another bed, like a big 2-person bed up front like you would see in my Vanagon or a later bay. What I like about this, though, is that you have your luggage on the back, storage back here, and when you're camping, you're not, wherever your vehicle is pointed, whether you're at a campground or even in just wherever you're pointed, you still get to look back at whatever it is that what you're looking at. Essentially, like if I was at a river, lake, etc., I would position the van, and you could do this in the later bay too, it didn't matter where you put it, but I do like the fact that it pops up this way. I've never slept on top. I know a lot of you viewers probably have, and that's great. But I do like the fact, because I'm a taller guy, I like it going this way, and I like using this area up here actually as a storage while it's popped up. Mm-hmm. Instead of being a sleeping quarters, I like there to be storage, and that makes sense to me. I don't mind the spare tire being here, and that's fine. There's all different configurations, but the original stamped bus, no matter what year it was, always had a space right here for it. Post split, because if it was a split, it'd be up front underneath.
Well, but that space, from personal experience, that becomes the stash box.
It does.
You put the cushion,
plate over here.
There's a cushion.
Put the cushion over there, and stuff, and that would be actually cool because. And I'm thinking about engineering something really like that shapes this so you have a little bit more space right here to go that way. Now, opposed to my Vanagon, you know, Westfalia really stepped it up after a certain amount of time, and they really got really good with their designs, and especially like their storage space and stuff like that. Like I figured out how to put my stuff in here and my stuff up front here and all that kind of stuff. But one thing that's a downside to this that I would say if I was to complain that it doesn't have the same exact like storage space. But I'm the kind of guy that doesn't like to just put stuff to put stuff. Like if I'm gonna put something somewhere, it's gonna be meaningful and it's gonna have a purpose, not just like, I'm gonna throw this over here and then like 10 months, comes around and then I forget about it, or all of a sudden I realize it was there. I'm like, oh, that's where that is. You know? My goal with this bus is to not modernize it to the point where it's obvious. I want it to be very subtle, very subtle, so that what you're looking at is 1969. I don't want it to look modern. I want it to just be old school and cool. With the Vanagon, it's definitely modern. You know, the expectations is to do all the things that you do with those, you know what I mean? Yeah, you know, it's interesting. The Germans really had a way about organizing things in a very efficient and very small space.
Which is where the bus came from. Fundamentally, that's why Ben Pond designed the bus, was
when he went to Germany
to maximize space.
Yeah, when he went to Germany and he saw the utility trucks that were at the factory, and he quickly scribbled, a picture of what he saw in his mind, and they were like, well, that's genius. We had no idea that we could actually make a market out of this.
Because what little trivia, they're not the same wheelbase, but the wheelbase for this. Mm-hmm. And for those, it's actually pretty similar. They're pretty close. So driving this is dimensionally, you have the turning rate. It's not quite like a Bug, but it's not like a truck. They don't drive like a truck for that reason.
And it doesn't drive like a truck. This thing actually, my truck, I have a truck over there. My truck does not drive as nicely and smooth as this thing does when you go through like bumps and stuff, even off-road. I also like the early bays because of the gearing. The gearing is so much more better when you're going off-road, because opposed to, like, for example, my Vanagon, it's high geared. It's geared to go on the highway. This thing is geared for as much torque as possible because you're dealing with a 50 horsepower engine and you're trying to get it going. And so when you're off-road, I mean, it's like, this is post-reduction gearbox, which was, if you're a Volkswagen enthusiast, you're probably like, well, I want reduction gearboxes. Those are the way to go on the off-road. Aside from the reduction gearboxes, these are actually just as sufficient in my opinion. And I can get it. I mean, I've camped in these things on, like, how you go to like a river rock and they're big cobblestones, and you're going over them and stuff like that. Pain in the butt in the Vanagon. You're revving it up, burning your clutch. This, it just crawls over it. So I do appreciate the transmission on this as opposed to that. Some people will agree with me, some people won't agree with me, and that's okay. But from my experience, now, albeit, I've got this thing weighted down quite a bit with the cargo carrier, the shower, the lift, the tires, the bumpers, all that kind of stuff. So, the horsepower rating in this thing was a little more better than what I get when I go over the pass in this. I can go over the pass at about 55 miles an hour. I hit third gear every once in a while with this weight. And I'm okay with that because it's geared down with all my gear and all my dogs, the water, all that kind of stuff that's in there. This, on the other hand, doesn't have all that stuff, but I have it geared down with all my gear, cooler, all that dogs, water, all that kind of stuff, you know. Same speed. There's really not much of a difference. You're gonna be slow. And I mean, if you like slow, I guess it's a good thing, right? I don't care. Listen, I tell this to all my customers who buy these vehicles from me. I say, listen, if you're gonna buy this for nostalgic purposes, great. But you gotta understand one thing. It's not gonna go very fast. And you're gonna have people passing you all the time. So if you're a person with pride and has pride issues, don't buy it. Because these were meant to tour, to experience the world around you while you're driving these things, whether it be a Eurovan, Vanagon, bus, split window, it doesn't matter. These were designed to be able to tour. So essentially, if you're gonna buy a bus or a Vanagon, you know, you're not buying it to go fast. You're buying it to smell the roses. You're buying it to experience the world around you. You're buying it to take in the things that you wouldn't otherwise take in if you're going.
If you enjoy driving, it's a driver's vehicle because you have to drive it full time.
Yes.
That is even in fourth gear. If you're on the freeway, you still have to be looking ahead because if you lose inertia, it's a pain to get it back. So you have to drive to maintain that inertia.
You do. And that's, okay, so.
Which I actually consider to be part of the fun.
It is a part of the fun. And I think that's why people love them so much. I've been driving them since the early 90s. So in a sense, like it almost feels like I haven't known anything different. However, I've been in the car business for over 25 years. I've owned new cars. I've driven a lot of cars. Not all the cars, but I've driven a lot of new cars. But there's not a single vehicle out there that gives me the joy and the smile than driving a bus, a Beetle, a Type 2 or Type 3 or Type 4. It's the smells. It's almost like I go into a time machine and go back in time to my parents' time, to our grandparents' time. And it's a comfortable feeling for me. And I wish and I hope that the younger generation will be able to also experience that too, because that's a part of history. I grew up, my parents, they had, our family rig was the Dodge Caravan, 1983. My parents bought their first one, and
we had an 87 with the wood grain trim on the side.
So we had that too in the 90s. We had an 86 with the wood grain trim, which I drove, but they loved the Caravan. So like up until I was a senior in high school, my mom had bought her last Caravan. I think it was a 99 or something like that. And then she went to some other manufacturer, but that was like the family rig in the 80s, right? And where do you see a Dodge Caravan? Rarely do you see a Dodge Caravan. And they were all over the road back in the day. The Ford Astros, the Chevy, the Chevy Astros.
Yeah, I would say the Chevy Astros,
the Ford Aerostars.
Yes.
And, the Pontiac and all the, they were all cool and they're all retro cool. And maybe the generation that's younger than us probably thinks they're really cool. And maybe those will be something. But they didn't manufacture enough to sustain the amount of time that these have lived through. And are they worthy of restoration? I don't know. They could be. But this vehicle right here is over 50 plus years old, almost 60 years old.
But this body style was in production until 10 years ago.
Exactly. I want to put a note on that. I just had this conversation with a friend about this. Volkswagen was a genius. About every 10 to 12 years, they kept relatively the same design in the bus, even in the Beetle. But let's look at the bus right now. So you had your T2s from 1949, produced in the American market to 1979. Some would say 1980 because it kind of rubbed into that a little bit. And
then they went to the Vanagon.
They went to the Vanagon. what I loved about the Germans and how they design things, they said, if it doesn't break, don't fix it. If it makes sense, keep it the way it is. But what we will do is we will change little things here and there throughout the 10 years that will make it, improve it bit by bit. And you can see that with these buses, from the splits to the early bays to the late bays, you know, and you look at the powertrain, and you look at the motors, and you look at the power and all that kind of stuff. And the, you know, Westfalia is progressing. Then you had the Rivieras that came into the picture because Riviera of Portland, Oregon, of which we live in, Westfalia didn't allocate them enough Westfalias to sell. So they had to come up with their own design in order to keep up with the demand of campers, with, you know, people who wanted to buy campers.